I stared in disbelief at the woman standing on my doorstep, suitcase in hand. Eloise, what are you doing here? My mother-in-law brushed past me without an invitation. Well, aren't you going to let me in, dear? I've come to help with the baby. Help? I repeated dumbly. My protests were drowned out by the sound of my husband's voice. Mom, what a wonderful surprise. Dean hurried over and enveloped Eloise in a hug. I watched the scene unfold with rising panic. This couldn't be happening. Eloise was now disentangling herself from Dean's embrace, tutting loudly. Honestly, you two? This place is a mess. Have either of you lifted a finger to prepare for the baby? Before I could respond, Dean jumped in. You're right, Mom. We've been swamped with work. It'll be a huge help having you here. My mouth dropped open. A help? Dean, we never discussed this. He shot me an apologetic glance. Babe, don't be like that. My mom just wants what's best for us. Eloise nodded vigorously. Of course, dear. A new mother needs guidance, after all. Her eyes bored into mine with thinly veiled disdain. I felt something inside me shrivel. This was exactly how it started with Jillian, Dean's sister. Eloise had swept in after Jillian's first child, running roughshod over every boundary until a bitter rift formed. Now she had her sights set on sinking her claws into my family, too. I don't need any guidance, I bit out. We're doing just fine on our own. Dean's brow furrowed in that familiar stubborn line. Don't be rude, Corinne. My mom is trying to help. Yes, I am. Eloise looped her arm through Dean's in a practiced motion. But if my support isn't wanted, I understand. Her gaze slid to me, eyes glistening with artificial hurt. I clenched my jaw, fury warring with desperation. I knew how this game ended. If I held my ground, I'd be the vilified one, the ungrateful daughter-in-law who shamed her devoted husband by rejecting his loving mother's overtures. When Dean's pleading expression joined the fray, I felt the last of my resistance crumble. Fine, I gritted out. She can stay. Eloise's smile was a rictus of false warmth. Thank you, dear. I'll try not to be a burden. I caught the gleam of triumph in her eyes and felt the first cold tendrils of dread uncurling in my heart. By allowing Eloise across the threshold, I'd granted her a foothold, and I had the terrible feeling she wouldn't relinquish it without one hell of a fight. True to her word, Eloise was indeed a burden from the moment she arrived. Within days, she had critiqued everything from my housekeeping to my wardrobe. Really, Corinne, you're going to wear that? It does nothing for your figure. She clicked her tongue in disapproval as I pulled on a loose maternity top. Dean, ever the peacekeeper, tried to intervene. Mom, lay off? Corinne looks great. But Eloise merely waved him off. Of course you'd say that, dear. But a mother needs to speak some hard truths sometimes. Her eyes bored into me again with that familiar disdain. I bit back the urge to snap at her, knowing it would only make me the vilified one in Dean's eyes. I felt the old anger and hurt churning in my gut, the same volatile stew I'd fought so hard not to inflict on my own mother. The final insult came a few days later when I caught Eloise clearing out space in the nursery closet. What are you doing? I demanded, my tenuous hold on civility fraying. Eloise didn't even turn around. Just making room for a few necessities, dear. You can't raise a baby in this pigsty. White, hot fury propelled me forward until I was right behind her. Those are my things! You can't just throw them out! Oh. Eloise arched one perfectly groomed brow. And where, pray tell? Were you planning to put the changing table? The crib? This tiny space can barely fit the basics. We were going to move the changing table into the bedroom, I growled through gritted teeth. Eloise tutted again, that same infuriating noise. Don't be ridiculous. You'll both need your rest. Keeping the baby in your room will only lead to squabbling and sleep deprivation. It's our baby. The words burst from me like shrapnel. We'll raise it how we see fit. In an instant, Eloise's expression shifted from feigned concern to cold disdain. Is that so? From where I'm standing, you're the one acting like a child, dear. My hands clenched into fists, barely resisting the urge to lash out physically. Before I could retort, the sound of Dean's footsteps reached my ears. I watched helplessly as Eloise smoothed her face into a mask of serene innocence. When Dean entered, I fought to keep my composure. Your mother is throwing out our things. What? Dean's gaze swiveled between us, plainly bewildered. Mom, what's going on? Nothing, sweetie. Eloise was the picture of aggrieved gentility. I was merely trying to make some space. But if Corinne would rather the baby sleep in squalor... That's not what I said. I could hear the shrillness in my own voice. Dean held up his hands in a placating gesture. Hey, let's all just take it easy, okay? The sickly sweet smile was back as Eloise laid a hand on his arm. Of course, honey, you know I only want what's best for you both. In that moment, I saw it all too clearly. Her maddening gaslighting, her manipulation of Dean's emotions to undermine me. Her flagrant disrespect for any boundaries I tried to set. This was why Jillian's family had cut ties. And if I didn't do something soon, Eloise would drive the same explosive wedge into my own marriage. A few days later, I escaped to my friend Maya's house, needing a break from the suffocating tension. I just don't know what to do, I vented as soon as she opened the door. Eloise is driving me crazy. She questions everything I do, oversteps every boundary. Maya ushered me inside, her expression one of sympathy. That's awful, Corinne. Why don't you just kick her out? I've tried. I sank onto her sofa with a groan. But Dean refuses to see how toxic she is. He's completely under her spell. Shaking her head, Maya sat beside me. Men can be so oblivious when it comes to their mothers. Have you tried talking to him again? Yeah, and it's always the same thing. She means well, Corinne. Don't be so hard on her. I threw up my hands in frustration. Meanwhile, Eloise acts like a sweet little angel whenever he's around. That manipulative witch, Maya muttered. I nodded miserably. Exactly. And the worst part is, she's already turning this pregnancy into a total nightmare. Can you believe she invited people over for some stupid baby prep party without even asking me? Maya's eyes widened. She didn't. Oh, she did. My jaw clenched at the memory. Just barged into the kitchen, announcing it like it was a done deal. I've invited the Hendersons and the Wilsons to come over this Saturday to help get things ready. Maya shook her head slowly. That's a major violation of privacy, not to mention safety concerns with strangers in your home. Tell me about it. I laughed bitterly. When I tried protesting, Eloise turned it around like I was the rude one, putting up roadblocks instead of embracing the village that was coming together for us. That's insane. Maya's eyes flashed with anger. She can't just appropriate your pregnancy like that. According to her, she absolutely can. When Dean backed her up on it, I trailed off, feeling defeated all over again. Maya's hand found mine, giving it a comforting squeeze. Hey, you can't let her get away with steamrolling you like this. That's exactly what she wants. Her words struck a chord. Eloise did want to dominate me, to usurp control over every aspect of my life under the guise of helping. Anger flared in my chest, burning away the hopelessness. You're right, I said, jaw set with new determination. I can't just roll over for her insanity. Enough is enough. Maya grinned fiercely. So what's the plan? 100 possibilities flickered through my mind, each more outrageous than the last. But one in particular made me pause. A half-formed scheme taking root. Actually, I said slowly, I might have an idea. A few days after my visit with Maya, the final straw came in the form of a shattered vase. I returned home from running errands to find Eloise rummaging through my closet again. Clothes and shoes were strewn everywhere. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, hands clenching into fists. Eloise didn't even turn around. Such language, Corinne. Hardly befitting for a mother. Befitting? I echoed, anger making my voice tremble. How about basic privacy and respect? That got her attention. Eloise swiveled to face me, mouth pinched in displeasure. Don't be so dramatic, dear. I was merely trying to clear out some space. By destroying my closet? Those are my things. Clutter and chaos, more like, she sniffed disdainfully. You'll thank me once the nursery is ready. Something inside me snapped at her sheer entitlement. Get out, I bit out through gritted teeth. Get out of my house right now. Eloise's eyes went wide with unconvincing hurt. Corinne, surely you don't mean... I mean it, I overrode her sharply. You've overstayed any welcome you might have had. Pack your things and leave. For a moment, she seemed taken aback by my vehemence. But her recovery was swift, lips curling into a disdainful smile. You poor, deluded girl. You honestly believe you have any authority here? Her tone was laced with patronizing pity. This is my son's home, and whether you like it or not, I'll always have a place in it. White-hot fury lanced through me. Before I could retort, the sound of shattering glass rent the air as my foot knocked over a vase. Eloise's hand flew to her mouth in theatrical dismay. "You clumsy child! Those were antique Venetian, you foolish girl!" I opened my mouth, any remaining respect I'd harbored for this woman withering on my tongue. But it was Dean's voice that cut through the tension. "What's going on?" I heard a crash. He took in the scene with bewildered eyes, the clothes strewn everywhere, my flushed cheeks, Eloise's look of carefully crafted dismay. Before I could say a word, she pounced. "Oh, sweetie, it was simply dreadful. I was only trying to help organize a bit, and Corinne just flew into a rage." "What?" I choked out. "That's not shattered that priceless vase your grandmother left me in a fit of uncontrolled temper." Eloise went on, tears welling artfully in her eyes. "I did not." I turned desperately to Dean. "She was going through my things again without permission." But the damage was done. Dean's expression was a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotions, disappointment, anger, hurt, all directed at me. "That's enough," he said lowly. "We'll discuss this later. Mom, why don't you go lie down?" With a tremulous sob, Eloise nodded and exited the room. I was left alone with Dean, suddenly bone-weary under the weight of his stony glare. "Well?" he prompted after a stilted silence. "What do you have to say for yourself?" I opened my mouth, 1,000 recriminations on my tongue. But in that moment I knew no defense would be enough to sway him. Dean was too entrenched in his blind support of his mother. My shoulders sagged in defeat. What was the point of fighting a war I couldn't win? That night, as I lay awake in bed, the first flickers of another strategy began taking shape. If shouting matches and explosive confrontations failed, perhaps a more subtle approach was needed. Eloise wanted to undermine me? Well, two could play at that game. Only this time I'd strike with stealth and cunning rather than blunt force. After all, she'd taught me well in the art of deception and revenge. The next morning, I awoke with a newfound sense of purpose. As Eloise swept into the kitchen, serene as ever, I forced a placating smile. "Good morning. I'm so sorry about my outburst yesterday. The pregnancy hormones, you know." I let out a self-deprecating chuckle. Eloise's eyes narrowed fractionally before she smoothed her features. "Well, I certainly understand how unsettling this transition can be, dear." "Exactly." I nodded in agreement. "Which is why I'm so grateful to have your guidance. You're absolutely right. I need to start nesting and embrace the village rallying around us." Her smugness was palpable, suspicion forgotten. "I'm pleased you've finally come to your senses." Over the next few days, I played the part of the reformed, compliant daughter-in-law to perfection. When Eloise criticized my cleaning methods, I listened meekly. As she reorganized the house to her liking, I uttered not a word of protest. All the while, I began piecing together my real plan. The first step was contacting Jillian, Dean's estranged sister. Though our relationship was strained due to Eloise's meddling, she proved a wellspring of information about our mother-in-law's past manipulations. "I've got boxes of evidence," Jillian confided when we met for coffee. "Emails, texts, you name it, all documenting the cruel, underhanded ways Mom drove a wedge between me and my husband until he couldn't take it anymore." I listened with equal parts horror and vindication as she recounted dozens of instances just like the ones I'd endured, only far worse. Next, I began stockpiling my own proof. Each time Eloise bounded a line, I hit record on my phone to capture the rants and diatribes when Dean wasn't present, her feigned politeness giving way to biting derision and judgment. "Who does she think she is, contradicting me like that?" she fumed after one argument about baby supplies. "She's worse than a child. At least children still mind their elders." Through it all, I maintained my facade of humbleness and compliance. Let Eloise have her shallow victory for now. She could swan around playing the martyr, the voice of reason, right up until her own actions undid her. The final piece fell into place when Maya helped me get in touch with two other daughters-in-law who'd been driven apart from their families by Eloise's poisonous influence. "Sarah and I used to be so close," Patty lamented, "but after our first big fight, which Mom masterfully instigated, she went running straight into her arms for support. I never stood a chance against that emotional blackmail." Their anecdotes were eerily similar, seeds of discord planted, allegiances divided, families torn asunder, all through Eloise's insidious machinations. By the time I hung up the phone that night, my path was clear. If this was the only way to wrest back control, to protect my family from the toxicity Eloise represented, then so be it. The next morning at breakfast, I was all sugary smiles as Eloise breezed in. "I've been thinking," I began lightly. "With the baby's arrival getting closer, I really want to clear the air, do something to bring everyone together again as a family." Eloise paused mid-sip of coffee, intrigued by my uncharacteristic olive branch. "Oh, what did you have in mind, dear?" My lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "A family dinner, actually. I think it's time we all had a long, overdue discussion about the future." The night of the family dinner, I was near vibrating with nervous anticipation. Despite my outward calm, it took every ounce of effort to keep my hands from shaking as I set the table. Right on schedule, the doorbell rang. I pulled open the door to find Jillian shifting awkwardly on the front step, her husband Rick beside her. "Thanks for coming," I murmured, ushering them inside. Jillian's expression was tight, her gaze flicking around like a trapped animal. "You're sure about this, Corinne?" Before I could respond, Maya arrived with Patty and Sarah in tow. A chorus of startled greetings filled the air as Eloise swept in from the kitchen. Well, what an unexpected reunion. Her eyes danced between the assembled families, mouth curved in a politically bland smile. "How lovely to have you all here." The calculated pleasantry grated, threatening my hard-won composure. I could see Jillian tense beside me, no doubt reading the same insincerity. Thankfully, Dean chose that moment to join us. "Hey, everyone's here. Should we get started?" I forced a bright smile. Actually, I thought we could wait for the final guests to arrive. Right on cue, the doorbell rang again. This time it was the Conway family, former in-laws who had cut ties with Eloise over a decade ago after an epic blowout regarding their grandchildren. Complete silence reigned as Eloise registered their presence, a muscle twitching in her artificially smooth cheek. "Judith, Thomas, how unexpected." Judith offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Really, Eloise? After all you've put our family through, you can't fathom why we're here." For the first time, I detected a flicker of unease in Eloise's perfectly cultivated mask, but her recovery was as swift as ever, the sickly sweet smile reappearing. Now, let's not let old grudges spoil the evening." "Cut the crap, Mom," Jillian suddenly burst out. All eyes swiveled her way as she took an unconscious step forward. "We're not falling for your gaslighting routine again." Eloise's expression shuddered, eyes glinting with cold fury despite the saccharine tone. "Jillian, darling, whatever are you? You manipulative, lying witch." It was Patty who exploded next, all her grievances bubbling over. "You destroyed my relationship with Sarah just like you tried with these others." The room erupted into a maelstrom of shouting voices, accusations flying, tempers flaring, decades of bitterness and pain unleashed. Through it all, Eloise stood ramrod straight, eyes blazing, veneer of civility disintegrating. At some point, Dean's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough! What the hell is going on here?" An eerie hush followed his bellow. I could see the stunned hurt writ across his features as the reality of the situation dawned. My mouth was dry as chalk, but I knew this was the moment. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone and met Eloise's gaze steadily. "You might want to have a seat for this." The first recording began to play, anger and condescension dripping from Eloise's tinny voice as she ranted about me. Then another file, more vicious put-downs and criticisms, and another after that, the damning evidence piling up one after another. Eloise paled, seemingly struck dumb. Dean's expression morphed from disbelief to stunned hurt to white-hot rage, as each new vileness issuing from his mother's lips assailed him. By the time the final recording clicked off, a profound silence had fallen over the room. I could see it all clicking into place for Dean, the missing puzzle pieces, the half-sensed deceptions. Finally he turned to Eloise, face like chiseled stone. "Get out!" Her mouth worked soundlessly as she struggled to find her footing. "Sweetheart, you don't understand." "I said get out!" Dean's roar made us all flinch. "I want you gone, Mom, tonight." To her credit, Eloise didn't argue further, shoulders slumped in rare defeat. She turned and walked out of the dining room, out of our lives. Only then did the euphoric chatter and embraces erupt around me. But all I could feel was the searing ball of hatred still burning in my belly, despite my victory. Because as satisfying as her downfall was, I knew it was only the beginning of making her pay. A tense silence fell over the dining room after Eloise's abrupt exit. I could sense the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions, accusations, and recriminations hanging in the air between Dean and the assembled families. Judith Conway was the first to break it. "Dean, I know this is a shock, but your mother's behavior—" "Don't." Dean's voice was little more than a ragged croak as he held up a hand. "Just don't." He dragged his palm down his face, suddenly looking decades older. When his eyes finally lifted to meet mine, they were haunted. "You knew about all of this vindictiveness, the cruelty." It wasn't quite an accusation, more a pleading for context, for something to make sense of the shattered reality before him. I swallowed hard against the surge of bitterness that welled in my throat. How many times had I tried explaining, only to be brushed aside? But righteous anger would only push him further away now. "I suspected for a while," I admitted quietly, "but I could never get through to you, Dean. Eloise was always able to gaslight me, twist the reality to make me seem irrational." He flinched slightly at her name, then sank heavily into a dining chair. The wariness emanating from him was a physical force. "So that's why you brought everyone here." Rick broke the stilted silence, realization dawning. "To gang up and force the truth." I opened my mouth to protest the callous phrasing, but Patty jumped in quickly. "Not gang up," she said firmly. "Corinne had to take drastic steps because of how thoroughly Eloise isolated us all, divided and conquered to maintain control." A dull flush crept up Dean's neck as he digested her words. I could practically see the pieces clicking into place, memories and long-buried doubts resurfacing to be viewed under a new, but unerringly honest light. Jillian reached across the table, placing a tentative hand over his. "I didn't want to believe it at first either. Not about Mom." Her lips twisted in a rueful approximation of a smile, but her awfulness became impossible to ignore after a while. Dean's jaw clenched hard, eyes glistening with shame, anger, a kaleidoscope of volatile emotions. When he spoke again, the words emerged muffled, as if forced between gritted teeth. "All this time? The horrible things she said about you." His haunted gaze found mine again, as the gravity of his betrayal seemed to crash over him in waves. While I just stood by and let her. A pregnant pause lingered as the hurt, the accusation remained unspoken. In that moment, I could have lashed out, unleashed the full fury of my spite and grievances upon him. But something in his ravaged expression stayed my tongue. Because as righteous as my anger burned, his anguish ran equally deep. My husband had been gaslit, masterfully manipulated by a toxic parent, just like the others in this room. His world had been upended as thoroughly as mine once was, so instead of dealing further blows, I rose and crossed to where he sat, slumped. Ignoring the others' questioning stares, I reached out and drew his head against my stomach, cradling him against the swell of my pregnancy. "It's going to be okay," I murmured, feeling his ragged breaths against my abdomen. "We're going to be okay." Dean stiffened for a moment, then seemed to melt into my embrace like a marionette with its strings cut. I stroked his hair lightly as his shoulders began to shake with silent sobs, offering him this rare shelter and solace. This was a new beginning, I realized. One built on a foundation of brutal truth, but truth nonetheless. Whatever came next, we would face it together as partners rather than adversaries. The cycle of toxicity and deception was broken. That night, as we fell into an exhausted sleep tangled in each other's arms, I understood the true cost of vengeance was not violence or hatred, but mercy. Mercy hard-won and bestowed upon the humbled. Only then could the past be laid to rest, making way for a brighter future. In the weeks after Eloise's banishment, an uneasy calm descended over our household. Dean and I walked on eggshells around each other, both still processing the cataclysmic shift in our reality. He spent long hours at work, as if immersing himself in familiar routines could undo Eloise's ruinous legacy. When he was home, a brittle tension crackled between us, both skirting the emotional minefield her deceptions had laid. I understood his withdrawal, his need to compartmentalize. God knew I'd erected my own fortresses over the years to survive Eloise's psychological warfare. But even those thick-walled defenses were straining under the weight of all that had transpired. The turning point came one night over a stilted dinner of reheated leftovers. Dean set down his fork with a dull clank. "This isn't working." I froze mid-bite, heart jackrabbiting as terrible scenarios flickered through my mind. Was this the moment our marriage finally buckled, shattered by the strain of Eloise's machinations? But when I met his gaze, I saw only weary resolution. We can't keep living like this, Corinne, tiptoeing around each other, sidestepping what happened. He exhaled a frustrated breath, raking a hand through his hair. I don't know where to start unraveling the tangled mess my mother created, but I do know shutting you out again isn't the answer. Something inside me unclenched at his words. I'm not going anywhere, I said impulsively. We'll get through this together. Dean's lips twitched in a reluctant half-smile as he reached across the table for my hand. Together. I like the sound of that. From that point, the walls between us began to gradually dismantle. In their place, an honest dialogue emerged, one founded on empathy, patience, and a mutual desire to shed Eloise's corrosive influence once and for all. Over long conversations, all the hurts and betrayals were slowly exhumed. The constant belittling, the manufactured conflicts designed to drive wedges, the insidious gaslighting that had us both questioning our reality. Laying it all bare was an excruciatingly painful process. But with each buried wound exposed and lanced, I felt lighter, more whole. Roles reversed too, as Dean opened up with a raw vulnerability I'd never witnessed before. He spoke of being the idealized son, the golden child who could never escape Eloise's web of demands and criticisms despite his devotion. I think a part of me always longed for her approval, he confessed haltingly, which is why I was so blind to her cruelties, no matter who tried warning me. In turn, I divulged the bone-deep fears Eloise had awoken, of being alone and outmatched as a new mother, of tainting our child's upbringing with echoes of the dysfunction that marred my own childhood. You saved me from that, I admitted, cradling my rounded belly. Saved us both. By the time the last of our lacerations had been cleansed and bound, I felt closer to Dean than I had in years. Not simply spouses united by domesticity, but partners buckling back to withstand the onslaught of trauma. Our bedroom became a sanctuary again, a sacred space reclaimed from the toxic taint of Eloise's influence. Physical intimacy took on new, profound dimensions as we relearned each other's boundaries and needs. Countless tender moments stitched past wounds into a new, stronger whole. The nursery, too, was an exercise in co-creation. Dean and I labored side by side, meticulously outfitting the space with every necessity, and not a single item imposed by his mother's interference. We emerged scarred, yes, but also formidably unified, an immovable bulwark erected to deflect any resurgence of Eloise's malice. When our daughter arrived 2 months later, squalling and perfect, we were girded for the challenges ahead. Absolutely nothing would disrupt the hard-won peace of our newly reclaimed lives. As I cradled my newborn's warmth against my chest, I knew this child would never want for security, stability, love. Those insidious cycles of toxicity ended with us. Eloise's shadow no longer touched this family. We had stepped, finally, into the light.
The gallery lights cast harsh shadows across my photographs, each image a silent accusation of everything my family refused to see. I adjusted the final piece, a stark black and white portrait of abandonment captured in an empty playground swing moving in the wind. Perfect metaphor for my life, really. They're not coming, are they? Sophie's voice carried across the empty exhibition space. My best friend already knew the answer, but she needed me to say it. I checked my phone again. No missed calls, no messages, just a 2-word text from Mom sent hours ago. Meeting running late. Of course not, I said, pocketing the phone. Mother dearest has an important case, and Dad's probably saving someone's life, or maybe they're both at Ryan's latest tech launch, or Evan's real estate thing. Take your pick. Sophie squeezed my shoulder. Millie, you've worked too hard to let them ruin this. The Times critic is coming. This could be huge for you. I'm Millie Thompson, eldest child, and perpetual disappointment to my high-achieving family. Tonight was supposed to be different. My first solo exhibition, the culmination of years of struggle and determination. I'd even named it Family Portraits, a not-so-subtle dig at the people who should have been here. The gallery door chimed. My heart jumped, but it was just Jake, my boyfriend, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. His musician's salary couldn't afford roses, but these meant more anyway. He took one look at my face and knew. "They're assholes," he said simply, handing me the flowers. "Language, dear," came a familiar voice. Grandma Rose appeared behind him, her silver hair immaculate as always. Though in this case, I agree with the sentiment. "Grandma, you shouldn't have come all this way." "Nonsense, I wouldn't miss my granddaughter's triumph." She surveyed the room with sharp eyes. "Though I see your parents are maintaining their perfect record of absence." The first guests started arriving. Critics, gallery owners, local artists, all the right people. I plastered on my professional smile and played hostess, but every time the door opened, I couldn't help looking. Hoping. An hour in, my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "Sorry, sis, Mom and Dad are at my investor meeting. Huge deal. You understand, right?" I did understand. I understood perfectly. The critic from the Times praised my raw emotional honesty and unflinching examination of familial disconnect. If he only knew. As the evening wound down, Grandma Rose pulled me aside. "There's something you should know, dear. About your brother's success." She hesitated, then pressed an envelope into my hand. "Look at these when you're alone, and remember, you're stronger than they think." I slipped the envelope into my bag, questions burning in my throat, but Grandma Rose just kissed my cheek and left, her perfume lingering like a promise. Later that night, after Jake had gone home and Sophie had helped clean up, I sat alone in my small apartment. The envelope contained bank statements, investment reports, emails. My hands shook as I read them. Everything. My brother's companies, their success, their perfect lives, built on lies and stolen money. Our parents had orchestrated it all, funneling millions into their ventures, while telling me I needed to learn independence. I looked at my phone. Another text from Mom. "Sorry we missed it. Dinner next week?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began planning my next exhibition. This one wouldn't be subtle. This one would show exactly who my family really was, in perfect, high-resolution detail. They wanted a successful daughter. Fine. I'd give them one they'd never forget. The first light of dawn was creeping through my windows when I finally went to bed. My dreams full of shattered family portraits and the sweet taste of revenge. The documents from Grandma Rose's envelope spread across my coffee table like a roadmap of betrayal. Each statement showed another investment in my brother's ventures. Hundreds of thousands funneled through shell companies and creative accounting. I'd spent 3 days analyzing every detail, my camera gathering dust in the corner. My phone buzzed. Mother's weekly guilt trip right on schedule. "Darling, you missed Sunday dinner again. The boys asked about you." I bet they did. Probably worried what else Grandma Rose had told me. The buzzer rang. Jake right on time with coffee and his usual optimism. "Got your favorite," he said, setting down 2 cups. He glanced at the papers. Still digging. "Look at this," I said, holding up a document. $2 million to Ryan's tech startup through a holding company. Same day Mom told me they couldn't help with my gallery rent because they were teaching me financial responsibility. Jake settled beside me, his guitar-calloused fingers brushing mine. "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from Evan. "Big family announcement tonight. Mom insists you come. No excuses." "Perfect timing," I muttered, showing Jake the message. "You're not actually going, are you?" I started gathering the documents. "Oh, I'm going, with my camera." The Thompson family estate loomed like a modern fortress, all glass and sharp angles. Mother's Mercedes and father's Audi sat in their usual spots, alongside Ryan's Tesla and Evan's Range Rover. My beat-up Volkswagen looked like a stray dog that had wandered into a purebred show. Inside, the usual performance was in full swing. Mother holding court in her designer dress, father checking his phone for surgical consults, the Golden Boys commanding attention like twin conductors of an orchestra. "Millie," Evan's voice carried that familiar false warmth, "finally decided to grace us with your presence." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, patting my camera bag. Documenting family moments is kind of my thing now. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. About your exhibition, we really meant to. Save it, I cut him off, watching Mother's expression tighten. I'm sure your investor meeting was far more important. Father finally looked up from his phone. Speaking of investments, your brothers have some exciting news. Of course they did. We're merging companies, Ryan announced. Tech meets real estate, revolutionary concept. With a significant investment from Mom and Dad, Evan added, beaming. I couldn't help myself. Through Cayman Holdings Limited, or are you using the Singapore Shell Company this time? The room went silent. Mother's wine glass rose halfway to her lips. What exactly are you implying? Father's voice had that dangerous edge he used with difficult patience. I pulled out my camera, snapping a quick shot of their faces. Just documenting the moment, for my next exhibition. I'm thinking of calling it Family Finances. Has a nice ring to it. That's enough, Mother snapped. If you're just here to cause trouble. Trouble? I laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Like the trouble of falsifying investment documents, or the trouble of systematic financial manipulation to keep your eldest child dependent while funneling millions to your precious sons. Ryan stood up. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I took another photo, capturing his panic. The question is, will your investors understand when they see the evidence? Evidence? Father's voice wavered slightly. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the documents. Amazing what a determined photographer can capture. Every transaction, every shell company, every lie. I looked directly at Mother. How do you think your law firm will react to this kind of creative accounting? You wouldn't dare, she whispered. Watch me. I stood up, gathering my things. Consider this your warning shot. There's more where this came from, and I'm done being the family disappointment. As I walked out, Evan called after me. Millie, wait, we can explain. I turned back one last time, raising my camera. Click. The perfect shot of a family facade cracking under pressure. In my car, hands shaking, I called Jake. How'd it go? He asked. They know, I said, starting the engine. And this is just the beginning. Be careful, he warned. Wounded animals are the most dangerous. I smiled, thinking of the photos I'd just taken. Good thing I've got plenty of evidence to protect myself. And this time, I'm the one calling the shots. Grandma Rose's hands trembled as she laid out more documents on her antique dining table. Your mother thought I was too old to understand modern banking, she said, sliding another folder toward me. She forgot I managed your grandfather's investment firm for 30 years after his death. The morning sun through her bay windows cast shadows across photographs of my brother's groundbreaking ceremonies, press conferences, product launches, all carefully orchestrated lies. There's something else, Grandma Rose said, her voice dropping. She pulled out a weathered envelope. Your college fund, the one they claimed was lost in bad investments. My throat tightened. What about it? It wasn't lost. They transferred it to Ryan's first startup, every penny. The room spun slightly. Those years of working 3 jobs between classes, eating ramen, selling my first camera to make rent, all while they had my money. My phone buzzed. Ryan, we need to talk, alone. They're scared, Grandma Rose observed, watching my face. Good. I met Ryan at his favorite overpriced cafe, where he'd already claimed the most private corner table. His usual confidence had cracked, revealing something I rarely saw. Fear. Whatever you're planning, he said, you need to stop. Or what? You'll tell Mom and Dad? Pretty sure they already know. He leaned forward, voice low. You don't understand what's at stake. It's not just about the money. Then enlighten me. The merger. It's not what we're telling people. We're in trouble, Millie. Deep trouble. If this goes public, you mean if your fraud goes public? It's not that simple. His fist hit the table, making heads turn. He lowered his voice again. Evan's real estate deals, my tech contracts, they're all connected. If one falls, everything falls, I finished, including Mom and Dad. He nodded miserably. They mortgaged everything to keep us afloat. The house, their retirement, everything. And whose fault is that? The words came out sharp as broken glass. They chose their golden boys. Now they can watch them fall. Please, Ryan's voice cracked. We can make this right. Cut you in, whatever you want. I pulled out my camera, capturing his desperate expression. What I want is 34 years of truth, starting with this. My phone buzzed again. Evan this time. Mom's in the hospital. Heart attack. Come quick. Ryan's phone lit up with the same message. Our eyes met across the table. Convenient timing, I said, standing. Jesus, Millie, this isn't a manipulation. She's our mother. At the hospital, Father paced the waiting room in his surgical scrubs. For once, not the one in control. Evan huddled with his wife in the corner. The perfect family portrait, cracking at the edges. She was reviewing some financial documents, Father said, his voice hollow, then collapsed in her office. I felt the weight of my camera bag heavy with evidence. What documents? His eyes met mine, understanding dawning. You're really going to do this? Destroy everything we built? You mean everything you built for them? I nodded toward my brothers. While teaching me about financial responsibility with money you stole from me. We did what we thought was best. Best for who? A doctor emerged and everyone tensed. She's stable, he announced, but needs rest, no stress. You hear that, Millie? Evan said. No stress, back off. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the documents. Funny how stress works. Like the stress of working through college because your college fund mysteriously vanished. Or the stress of watching your younger brothers get millions while you can barely make rent. This isn't the time, Father warned. It never is. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Dad, you might want to check Mother's office. I sent copies of everything to her partners at the firm. Let's see how her heart handles that. In the parking lot, I called Jake. How bad? He asked. Mother's playing the heart attack card, but I found out about my college fund. A pause. What are you going to do? I watched through the hospital windows as my family huddled together, excluding me even now. I'm going to finish what they started. It's time everyone saw the real Thompson family portrait. Be careful, Jake said. You're playing with fire. Good thing I've got plenty of evidence to fireproof myself with. I started my car. And Jake, thank you for being on my side. Always, he said softly. Just make sure this revenge doesn't burn you too. But as I drove away from the hospital, I knew it was too late for warnings. The fire was already burning, and I intended to watch it all go up in flames. The gallery buzzed with anticipation as I hung the final piece, a massive photograph of my brother's merger announcement, overlaid with transparent copies of their fraudulent financial documents. Art meets evidence, the perfect centerpiece for my new exhibition, Family Values. Sophie touched my arm. Channel 8 is here, and the Business Journal. Right on schedule. I adjusted the lighting, making sure every detail was visible, every lie exposed. My phone vibrated. Evan. I let it go to voicemail, like I had with the previous 12 calls from my family. The exhibition opening was in 30 minutes. Let them see it with everyone else. Jake appeared with coffee, his face tight with concern. Security's in place. Your family won't be able to shut this down. They can try. I checked my watch. Where's Grandma Rose? Here, darling. She emerged from the crowd, elegant as always. Though I'm afraid we have company. Mother's legal team filed in, led by her senior partner, Harrison Wells. All tailored suits and predatory smiles. Miss Thompson, Harrison approached, brandishing papers. We have a cease and desist order. I took a photo of him holding the documents. Perfect for the collection. On what grounds? Defamation, invasion of privacy, corporate espionage. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, I quoted, remembering Mother's frequent boast. And everything here is true, isn't it, Harrison? Including the documents showing how your firm helped cover up their fraud. His smile faltered. Behind him, several reporters perked up, scenting blood. You're making a mistake. he warned quietly. Your mother is still recovering from her convenient heart attack. Funny how that happened right when... Millie, Ryan's voice cut through the crowd. He stood with Evan at the gallery entrance, both looking exhausted. Please, don't do this. I raised my camera. Click. Too late. The exhibition opened. Crowds moved through the space, murmuring at the evidence displayed alongside artistic photographs capturing years of familial manipulation. Financial documents became abstract patterns. Bank statements transformed into damning poetry. A reporter approached. Miss Thompson, these allegations against Thompson Technologies and Evans Development are all supported by documentation, I finished, pointing to the wall of evidence, including proof that they stole my college fund to launch their first ventures. More reporters gathered. Questions flew, cameras flashed. Then Father arrived, looking older than I'd ever seen him. You've made your point, he said quietly. Name your price. I laughed. My price? You think this is about money? Then what do you want? The truth, all of it, starting with why. A commotion at the entrance interrupted us. Mother stormed in, ignoring her doctor's orders, face flushed with fury or exertion, or both. You ungrateful, she started, then clutched her chest. Father rushed to her side, but she waved him off, straightening. If you think this little stunt will what? I challenged. Expose how you built your precious sons' careers by stealing from me. Show everyone the real Thompson family values. We gave you everything, she exploded. We taught you independence while they what? Needed coddling, millions in secret funding, my money. The gallery had gone silent, everyone watching our family implode in real time. Phones recorded. Reporters scribbled. You don't understand, Mother said, her voice breaking. We had to protect them. They're not like you, they're not strong enough to... She stopped, realizing what she'd admitted. In front of everyone, Ryan and Evan stared at her, their perfect world cracking. I raised my camera one last time, capturing the moment their golden pedestals crumbled. Thank you, Mother. That's exactly what I needed. As security escorted my family out, Jake squeezed my hand. You okay? I watched the reporters swarm, the social media posts multiply, my family's carefully constructed facade dissolving in real time. No, I admitted, but I will be. Grandma Rose appeared beside me. It's not over, you know. They'll fight back. Let them. I surveyed my work. Truth transformed into art, secrets exposed in beautiful, damning detail. I've got nothing left to lose. But as the night wore on and the story spread, I wondered if that was really true, and if the price of revenge would be higher than even I was prepared to pay. The media circus exploded faster than I'd anticipated. 3 days after my exhibition, Thompson Technologies stock plummeted 60%. Evans' real estate empire faced multiple fraud investigations. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with reporters seeking comments. I scrolled through the headlines on my laptop. Thompson family scandal deepens. Tech prodigy's house of cards. Real estate empire built on stolen dreams. Sophie set down a coffee beside me. Your cousin Andrea called. Says the whole extended family is taking sides. Let me guess which side they're choosing. I closed the laptop, too tired to read more. The satisfaction I'd expected felt hollow, leaving a metallic taste in my mouth. My phone lit up. An unknown number. Miss Thompson, this is Detective Marcus Chen, Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to discuss your evidence against Thompson Technologies. The police. I hadn't expected that. My hands shook as I ended the call. Jake found me in my darkroom later, developing photos from the exhibition opening. Mother's face contorted in rage, Father's defeated posture, my brother's crumbling facades. Ryan's wife left him, Jake said quietly, took their kids to her parents' place in Boston. The image in the developer tray slowly revealed itself. Ryan and Evan, looking lost in their expensive suits. For a moment, I saw us as children again, before the money and lies corrupted everything. They made their choices, I said, but my voice wavered. Millie, Jake's tone made me look up. Your father's hospital suspended him. There's talk of a medical board investigation. Good. The word came out automatically, but my stomach clenched. My phone buzzed again. Grandma rose. Turn on Channel 5 now. I rushed to the living room. Mother stood at a podium outside her law firm, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I am announcing my immediate resignation as senior partner, she said, her voice cracking. The allegations regarding my family's financial dealings are... She collapsed. The cameras caught everything. Father rushing from the crowd, the paramedics, the chaos. Jesus, Jake whispered. My phone exploded with messages. Ryan, are you happy now? Evan, they're admitting her to cardiac ICU. Father, if anything happens to your mother, it's on you. I grabbed my camera bag, heading for the door. Where are you going? Jake called after me. To finish this. The hospital corridor stretched endless and sterile. Through the ICU window, I saw Mother connected to machines, Father holding her hand. I raised my camera, then slowly lowered it. Quite a show you've put on. Evan's voice behind me, bitter as burnt coffee. But did you know about Ryan's kids? His wife found out she's pregnant. Those children will grow up with their father's name destroyed. Like I grew up with nothing. I turned to face him. While you had everything. We had pressure, he exploded. Constant, crushing pressure to succeed, to be perfect. You were the lucky one. You got to be free. Free? I laughed, the sound echoing harshly. Is that what you call working 3 jobs through college? Selling my equipment to make rent? At least you got to fail on your own terms. We never had that luxury. A nurse hurried past, glaring at us. Through the window, Mother stirred, her monitors beeping faster. My phone buzzed, another reporter wanting comments, then a text from Sophie. Police just left your gallery. They're seizing everything as evidence. The walls seemed to close in. What had I started? The DA's office is involved now, Evan said quietly. They're looking at RICO charges, prison time, all of us, including Mom and Dad. I thought of Mother in handcuffs, Father in prison orange, my brothers in jail cells. The Thompson name splashed across headlines for years to come. You wanted revenge, Evan continued. Congratulations. Arns, you've destroyed us all. He walked away, leaving me alone in the sterile corridor with my camera and the weight of what I'd set in motion. My phone buzzed again. Grandma rose. Come to my house. There's something you need to see, something that changes everything. I looked one last time through the ICU window. Mother's eyes opened, meeting mine. In that moment, I saw something I'd never expected. Fear. The same fear I felt growing in my own chest as I realized this revenge had taken on a life of its own. And I wasn't sure I could control where it ended, or who it would destroy next. Grandma Rose's hands shook as she pushed a yellowed envelope across her antique coffee table. I should have shown you this years ago, she said, but I was afraid of what it would do to you. Inside, I found a suicide note. My grandfather's handwriting, dated 2 days before his heart attack 30 years ago. He discovered your mother's first financial manipulation, Grandma Rose said quietly. She was embezzling from his firm to start her law practice. When he confronted her, the words blurred on the page. My revenge wasn't original at all. I was just repeating family history, right down to the heart attacks. My phone buzzed. Detective Chen again. I ignored it, like I'd ignored the last 6 calls. Your mother learned from the best, Grandma Rose continued. She watched how your grandfather's death destroyed our family. And now I'm doing the same thing. The realization hit like a physical blow. My phone lit up with a news alert. Thompson Technologies files for bankruptcy, thousands of jobs at risk. Thousands. Not just my brothers, not just my parents. Thousands of innocent people. Jake called next. Millie, turn on the news, now. I fumbled for the remote. Ryan stood at a podium, looking haunted. In light of recent revelations, Thompson Technologies will cease operations effective immediately. Our 4,000 employees. His voice cracked. We regret. He couldn't finish. Evan appeared, supporting him as reporters shouted questions. What have I done? The words came out as a whisper. What you had to, Grandma Rose said, but her voice lacked conviction. My phone exploded with messages. Sophie, police just left your apartment. They have a warrant. Jake, don't go home. Come to my place. An unknown number. Your brother Ryan just attempted suicide. Metropolitan Hospital ER. The room spun. I grabbed my camera bag, running for the door. Millie, wait, Grandma Rose called after me. There's more you need to know. But I was already gone. The hospital corridor stretched endless and white. Through the ER doors, I glimpsed Father arguing with doctors, Mother sobbing in a chair, despite her own cardiac concerns. Evan paced, phone to his ear, probably talking to lawyers. I raised my camera automatically, then stopped. What was I documenting now? The destruction I'd caused? Happy now? Evan spotted me. He took sleeping pills, lots of them, left a note about failing everyone, about the workers losing their jobs, about his kids growing up ashamed. I never meant. You meant exactly this, he snarled. You wanted us destroyed. Congratulations, mission accomplished. Mother looked up, saw me. The hatred in her eyes made me step back. Miss Thompson? Detective Chen appeared beside me. You need to come with us, now. What's happening? We have evidence suggesting you manipulated some of the financial documents in your exhibition, created false narratives for revenge. That's impossible. I have proof. Your proof has been compromised. Your grandmother's testimony. What? She provided evidence that she helped you fabricate documents to destroy your family's reputation. She's already given her statement. The floor seemed to tilt. Grandma Rose had betrayed me? Or had I betrayed myself, so blinded by revenge I couldn't see what was real anymore? Through the ER window, I watched the doctors work on Ryan. Mother's sobs echoed down the corridor. Father's medical career was over. Evan's real estate empire had crumbled. Thousands of innocent employees were jobless. And now, apparently, I was going to jail. My camera felt heavy in my hands. I'd thought I was documenting truth, exposing lies. Instead, I'd become the very thing I hated, someone who destroyed families for personal gain. Your camera, please. Detective Chen held out his hand. It's evidence now. I clutched it tighter, my last connection to who I thought I was. Millie, Jake appeared, breathless from running. Don't say anything, I called a lawyer. But as I handed over my camera, watching Chen bag it as evidence, I realized no lawyer could fix this. I'd wanted to expose the truth about my family, but the real truth was worse than I'd imagined. I wasn't just like my mother, I was worse. The police station's interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Detective Chen spread photographs across the metal table. My exhibition pieces, but different, altered, each one showing evidence of digital manipulation I'd never done. Your grandmother was very thorough, he said, provided timestamps, editing software records, everything. My lawyer touched my arm, warning me to stay silent, but the words burst out anyway. Those aren't my edits. Someone changed them. The door opened. Grandma Rose entered, supported by a police officer, looking frailer than I'd ever seen her. But her eyes, they held something I'd never noticed before, something cold. Tell her, she said to Chen. Show her what we found in Theodore Thompson's old files. My grandfather's name hit like a slap. Chen pulled out another file. Your grandfather didn't commit suicide, Miss Thompson. He was murdered, and we have evidence suggesting your grandmother was involved. The room tilted. What? She's been planning this for 30 years, Chen continued. Using you to finish what she started, destroying the Thompson family from within. Grandma Rose's frail facade cracked, revealing steel underneath. They took everything from me. Your mother, your grandfather. They pushed me out of my own company, made me watch while they built their empire on my work. So you used me? The words tasted like ash. All of it. The documents, the support, the love. The love was real. Her voice sharpened. That's why I had to protect you from becoming them. Look what they did to you, what they're still doing. I gave you the weapon you needed. By falsifying evidence, making me think, making you see the truth. They did steal from you. They did favor your brothers. I just enhanced the proof. The door burst open again. Ryan stood there, pale but alive, with Evan and our parents behind him. Mother's face was ash white. Father's hands trembled. Is it true? Ryan asked. About grandfather? Grandma Rose straightened, suddenly looking decades younger. He chose your mother over me, his own wife, gave her control of everything we'd built together. So yes, I made sure he paid for that betrayal. And I've spent 30 years watching his precious daughter become exactly what he feared. By destroying innocent lives. I stood up, shaking off my lawyer's restraining hand. Those workers, Ryan's children, everyone hurt by what I did, what you made me do. I didn't make you do anything. Her smile was terrible. I just gave you the match. You chose to light the fire. Enough. Mother's voice cracked like a whip. You wanted to destroy me? Fine. But using my daughter, making her into your weapon, like you used your sons, Grandma Rose countered. We're not so different, Lily. We both sacrifice family for revenge. The truth hit me then, looking between these two women. I was becoming both of them. Mother's ruthless ambition, Grandma Rose's calculating revenge. The perfect blend of the worst parts of my family legacy. Detective, I said quietly, I'd like to make a statement about everything. The real evidence, the false documents, all of it. Millie, don't. Grandma Rose started. You taught me about truth, Grandma. Through the lens, remember? So let's show everyone the whole picture. I looked at my family. Mother's tears, father's shame, my brother's broken dreams. Then at Grandma Rose, who'd orchestrated it all through me. I'm not choosing sides, I said. I'm choosing truth. The real truth, not your versions of it. And whatever consequences come with that. You'll lose everything, Grandma Rose warned. I thought of Jake waiting outside, of Sophie's unwavering support, of the person I wanted to be versus the weapon I'd become. No, I said, I'm finally finding myself. Detective Chen pushed a recorder forward. Behind him, my family waited, broken but present. Maybe that was the first truth we all needed to face. We were damaged, but we were still here. I took a deep breath and began to speak, letting the real story emerge through the wreckage of all our carefully constructed lies. It wasn't the revenge story Grandma Rose wanted, or the success story Mother dreamed of. It was messier, harder, more honest. It was mine. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should in spring. I adjusted my camera, capturing the morning light as it hit the bronze Lady Justice above the entrance. My last professional photo for a while. The plea deal ensured that. Jake squeezed my hand as we watched Grandma Rose emerge in handcuffs. She looked smaller now, diminished, but her eyes still held that steel when they met mine. The officers helped her into the police car, and just like that, 30 years of calculated revenge ended with a quiet click of car doors. My phone buzzed. Ryan. They're starting the Employee Relief Fund today. Could use your help with the documentation. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Inside the courthouse, Mother waited with her own lawyers. The sight of her made my chest tight, but I forced myself to approach. The restitution payments are set up, I said, handing her a folder. Everything I earned from the exhibition plus my savings. It won't fix everything, but... Keep it. She looked older, grayer, but somehow more real than she'd ever been. Use it to rebuild your gallery. The right way this time. Mother, I've spent too many years trying to control my children's lives. She smoothed her jacket, a lawyer's habit. Look where that got us. Through the window, we watched Grandma Rose's police car pull away. 3 generations of Thompson women, each thinking we knew best, each leaving destruction in our wake. She loved you, you know, Mother said quietly. That wasn't a lie. Just like I loved your brothers, and you, even if I showed it wrong. The words hung between us, fragile as camera film. Father and my brothers waited in the corridor, all of us broken in different ways. Evan's real estate empire had crumbled, but he'd started over with a small local firm. Ryan was rebuilding too, focusing on ethical tech investments. Their perfect facades had shattered, revealing something more human underneath. The detective returned this. Father held out my camera, said they don't need it as evidence anymore. I took it, feeling its familiar weight. Through this lens, I tried to expose truth, then twisted it, then finally found it in the wreckage of all our lies. I have something to show you, I said. In my new studio, Annie, but mine, I unveiled the prints I'd been working on. Simple family portraits, Mother's tired smile, Father's worried hands, Ryan's quiet strength as he rebuilt, Evan's humble determination. No manipulation, no agenda, just truth. It's called reconstruction, I explained, if you'll let me show it. They studied the images, seeing themselves through my lens. Not as the perfect family we'd pretended to be, or the monsters we'd become, but as something in between, something real. When's the opening? Ryan asked. You don't have to. We want to, Evan said. This time, we'll be there. Jake appeared in the doorway, guitar case in hand. Ready for rehearsal? I nodded, gathering my camera. My family watched, uncertain of their place in this new reality. Sunday dinner, Mother said suddenly. If you want, both of you. Jake and I exchanged glances. We'll think about it. Outside, spring sunlight caught the edge of my lens, creating prisms. Through it, I saw my family emerging from the studio, damaged, healing, trying. Not perfect, not ruined, just human. You okay? Jake asked as we walked to his gig. I thought of Grandma Rose, of Mother, of the legacy of revenge and control I'd almost continued. Of the difference between exposing truth and creating it. No, I admitted, but I'm getting there. I raised my camera one last time, capturing this moment, not for an exhibition or revenge, but for myself. The light, the shadows, the complex truth of family and forgiveness. The shutter clicked, and I let it tell its own story.
My name is Stacy. I am a housewife living with my husband Patrick and mother-in-law. I just turned 27 and we are in our third year of marriage. We don't have any children yet. My husband tells me not to rush, but my mother-in-law pressures me when we're alone. One day, while my husband was at work, I was alone with my mother-in-law. Suddenly, she sighed heavily and started making snide remarks. Hey, are you infertile? Why don't you have children? I don't think I'm infertile. Then you should have children. Is it because you and your husband don't get along? No, that's not it. That's good then. But if you can't have children, I'll have you divorced. Divorce? Of course. What's the point of having a daughter-in-law? Who can't carry on the family line? That's so cruel. The sneers about not being able to have children escalated daily. Soon, it became a daily occurrence to be rushed for children. I thought about discussing it with my husband. But I didn't want to strain the parent-child relationship, so I refrained. My husband comes from a single-mother family, and he has an older sister, Mandy, who is married and living at her husband's family home. They have been married for over 5 years but still have no children. Thus, my mother-in-law was eagerly awaiting the birth of her first grandchild. However, being rushed didn't feel good, and I was becoming increasingly stressed. Then, one day, I received some good news. Mandy was pregnant. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law was overjoyed and looked forward to the birth of her grandchild. Since learning of Mandy's pregnancy, she stopped pressuring me. I finally felt relieved from the stress, but it was short-lived. My mother-in-law started saying outrageous things when my husband was not around. "Stacy, may I speak with you? What's wrong? When Mandy's child is born, could you please move out of this house?" "What? Of course, I won't make Patrick leave. Just you. Why? Are you saying we should live apart even though we're married?" "That's right. I want to prepare a room for my grandchild here. Give your room to my grandchild. This house is originally ours, after all. I absolutely refuse to live apart from Patrick. Are you defying me? You've got some nerve. I'll make sure to drive you out no matter what." The next day, while I was out, my mother-in-law had packed my belongings. When my husband came home and noticed, he became suspicious. "Mom, why are you packing Stacy's things?" "Oh, that. I want to turn Stacy's room into a room for Mandy's child when she's born." "A room for the grandchild? Then what about Stacy's room? This is our house originally, right? Stacy's room never existed. It's my house, so I can do whatever I want, can't I? Are you serious? If you do that, we'll stop living together." "Why? Aren't you happy about becoming an uncle? That's not the issue. Put Stacy's things back the way they were. Choosing your wife over your mother, I see. I'm disappointed." My mother-in-law said this and went back to her room crying. The next day, she continued trying to pack my things. "Don't tell Patrick," she said. And I felt stressed again. Then, one day when Mandy visited our house, she suddenly said something unbelievable. "Once the baby is born, can I leave it with you, Stacy? You're a childless housewife, so you must be free, right? Take care of it?" "Why? Unlike you, Stacy, I'm busy. So become my personal babysitter." "That's impossible. Then who will take care of my child?" "It's tough for just mom, isn't it? Don't you want to raise your own child?" "That's why I'm busy." Listening to her selfish remarks, my mother-in-law nodded as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When I firmly refused my sister-in-law Mandy's request, she got angry and left. A few days later, Mandy came crying suddenly. "Mom, I had a miscarriage." "What? A miscarriage?" Mandy cried out and clung to our mother-in-law, who also looked like she might start crying any moment. "Just a few days ago, we were all talking about the future with the child. I never thought something like this would happen." I was so saddened that I stood frozen. Then Mandy glared at me and screamed, "What are you looking at? Go away." Perhaps she wanted to take her frustration out on someone. Thinking this, I did as she said and went back to my room. From that day, my mother-in-law was in a foul mood. Knowing about Mandy's miscarriage, my husband said, "Let's leave her be for now," and refrained from speaking to her. When my husband went to work, her mood worsened, and she began to vent her irritation by making sarcastic comments to me. "You're so carefree. Mandy had a miscarriage, and you're not even a little upset. That's not true. It's all your fault she miscarried. You refused to be the babysitter." "What? Her miscarriage was because she felt anxious after you refused to babysit. Poor Mandy. It's all your fault. How are you going to take responsibility? Blaming me for Mandy's miscarriage." My mother-in-law began to harass me out of resentment. One day, when my husband and I returned from a meal out on his day off, I found all my belongings thrown out into the hallway. Seeing this, my husband exclaimed, "This is the last straw," and furiously confronted his mother. "Did you do this, Mom? Yes, what's wrong with that? Stop it. Stop taking your anger out on Stacy. I'm not taking my anger out. It's Stacy's fault Mandy miscarried. So what's wrong with taking revenge on her behalf? Stacy's fault? How does that even make sense? Forget it, do whatever you want. With that, my husband took my hand and led me outside. Once we were alone in the car, he apologized. Sorry for all this. Let's end the cohabitation. Yeah, that would be best. From then on, we started looking for an apartment to live in, just the two of us. Unaware of this, my mother-in-law continued trying to drive me out alone and escalated her harassment. She threw away the food I made and even my favorite clothes. I had been feeling unwell, likely due to stress, with nausea and headaches so severe that there were days I couldn't get out of bed. Noticing this, my husband worried and accompanied me to the hospital on his day off. To our surprise, the hospital visit revealed I was pregnant. My husband and I held hands and rejoiced on the spot. However, I was still concerned about my mother-in-law. What would she say if we announced the pregnancy at this time? For now, we decided not to tell her until I was in a stable period and just take it easy, claiming I was unwell. Morning sickness was so severe that moving wasn't an option. So we put off apartment hunting until I felt better. To reduce stress, my husband suggested I stay at my parents' house while he was at work during the unstable period. I explained to my parents that my mother-in-law was unstable due to Mandy's miscarriage. My parents agreed that leaving her alone for now is the right thing to do, and supported me at home while I struggled with severe morning sickness. Wanting to avoid any stress, I made efforts to stay away from my mother-in-law until the stable period was near. One day, just before entering the stable period, my husband came to pick me up from my parents' house after work, and we returned home together, only to find my mother-in-law and Mandy standing defiantly at the entrance. My husband asked what was going on, and my mother-in-law, looking displeased, pulled something out of her pocket. Upon closer inspection, it was an ultrasound photo from the hospital. Why do you have that, Mother? I found it while snooping through your room. You're pregnant? Give up on it. It would hurt my daughter too much since she just had a miscarriage. Give up? Why? If you have a child now, it will hurt Mandy, won't it? Hearing my mother-in-law's words, my husband became angrier than I'd ever seen him. Don't mess with us. Then Mandy spoke up. The miscarriage was your fault. I won't let you have this child, understand? Why should I be blamed so much just for being pregnant? As I thought about this, a feeling of indignation sprouted within me, and the anger I had been suppressing reached its limit and spilled out of me. I'm cutting ties with my in-laws. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law both responded in unison, what? You only think about yourselves and never consider our happiness. I don't want to involve my child with people like you anymore. As I said this, my husband continued to agree with me. I agree with Stacy. Thanks for packing up, Mom. Actually, we've almost decided where to live, so we're leaving soon. My mother-in-law was furious. Don't decide on your own, but we ignored her and left the house. We stayed at my parents' house that night and signed a lease for an apartment the following weekend. We resolved to end the cohabitation cleanly and distance ourselves from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Finally, I started living a stress-free life, entered a stable period, and felt completely healthy. My husband also said we should have done this sooner, as my husband and I got used to living together, and my pregnancy became more apparent. My previously silent mother-in-law suddenly called. "Something terrible has happened." "Come right now," she said. And hung up. Her tone was urgent. So we visited my in-laws' house for the first time in a while. Upon arriving, we could hear my mother-in-law and sister-in-law arguing inside. When we entered and urged them to calm down, my mother-in-law began explaining through tears. According to her, my sister-in-law had returned home suddenly saying she was getting divorced and demanding compensation. It turned out my sister-in-law had been cheating for years and was pregnant with her lover's child. She had planned to raise the child as her husband's, but midway, the lover suggested they terminate the pregnancy. She was afraid of being exposed by a DNA test someday. My sister-in-law had lied about having a miscarriage, but her husband found the medical bills and discovered she had an abortion. Apparently, her husband had already suspected something was off with the timing of the pregnancy and when they had tried for a child. When the abortion came to light, he suspected an affair and hired a detective, which confirmed my sister-in-law had been cheating for years. Enraged, her husband and his parents kicked her out and demanded compensation. As a housewife, my sister-in-law turned to my mother-in-law for help. However, after learning the whole story, my mother-in-law became furious, and a huge argument erupted. After hearing everything, my husband said, "It has nothing to do with us anymore." Then my mother-in-law clung to him. "Don't say that. I was deceived by Mandy. I regret kicking you out. I apologize. So let's live together again." I didn't think living on a pension alone would be this hard, thinking it was outrageous to conveniently want to cohabitate again. Just because she was in trouble, my husband felt the same. "Apologies won't fix what you did, Mom. Have you forgotten what you did? That was because I was brainwashed by Mandy. I was out of my mind back then. It's all Mandy's fault, I'm the victim." As my mother-in-law tried to switch allegiance to us, my sister-in-law exploded in anger. "What? Blaming everything on me? Mom, you said you hated Stacy too." "Shut up. The only one I hate is you. Are you going to abandon your own daughter? I have nowhere to live and no money. That's your fault for cheating. It has nothing to do with me. Just use your pension to support me. I have to pay compensation. I don't care about the compensation. I don't remember giving birth to a woman who gets pregnant by an affair. Get out of here now." With that, my sister-in-law ran out of the house. Left behind, my mother-in-law spoke to us kindly. "Patrick, Stacy, I'm truly sorry about that time. I'll help with the baby. So rest assured." "When are you coming back?" My husband coldly replied to my mother-in-law's gentle smile. "We have no intention of dealing with you anymore. I won't forget being told to give up on our child. But that was. No matter what you say now, it's useless. We're cutting ties with you and my sister." "Cutting ties? So you won't let me see my grandchild?" "Of course not. I won't let someone who said to abort our child meet them. Please, forgive me. It's too late for anything you say." Ignoring my mother-in-law's cries like a child, my husband and I returned home. He had said everything I wanted to say, and I felt completely relieved. Later, my sister-in-law, having nowhere to go, wandered around before deciding she could only rely on my mother-in-law. She apologized and started living with her again. However, as my sister-in-law had been a housewife for years and couldn't find a job, living expenses fell on my mother-in-law's pension and savings. A few months after my sister-in-law returned, my mother-in-law's savings were depleted due to the compensation payments. Desperate, my mother-in-law called my husband repeatedly. "Hello, Patrick? Please, send money. I can't live without it. Support? We're practically strangers now. I don't care about someone else's life. Don't contact us anymore, we'll be busy with the baby soon. Don't say that, let's live together again. I'm blocking you now. Please." My husband coldly cut off contact with my mother-in-law. From then on, there was no more contact from her. Rumor has it, pressured by my mother-in-law to get a job, my sister-in-law decided to become a nightclub worker. She then got involved with a married man and was again demanded compensation. It seems my sister-in-law, who had a bad drinking and men habit, continued her infidelity. She frequently caused trouble, and my mother-in-law was driven to mental illness and had to seek medical treatment. Despite this, the two continued to live under the same roof, constantly arguing. As for me, I safely gave birth to a healthy girl, and our family of 3 started a happy life. My parents were delighted with the birth of their granddaughter, and my mother has been a great help with childcare. My husband says he will never tell his mother our address or let her meet our daughter. It's only natural after what we went through with her and my sister-in-law. I want to cherish our happy life for my husband, who protected me from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. We plan to build a warm home and live happily ever after as a family of 3.
I always believed in the power of a well-laid plan. As a mother of 2 with a career in project management, planning was not just a skill, it was my lifeline. But some moments in life, no matter how meticulously you plan, spiral in directions you never anticipated. The birth of my 3rd child was one such moment. It was a balmy evening in late August when I sat down with my husband Mark to finalize the birth plan. Our living room was quiet, a rare occurrence in a house usually filled with the rambunctious laughter and chaos of our 2 sons, aged 4 and 6. They were at my mother's house for the night, a small but significant detail in the tapestry of our plan. "Okay, so when I go into labor, you'll drive me to the hospital, and Mom will be there with us, right?" I confirmed with Mark, who nodded, his eyes scanning the spreadsheet I had created. "And your mom will pick up my mother, the kids, and Graham from Mom's house. Everyone's on board with this?" I asked, seeking one last confirmation. "Absolutely," Mark reassured me, squeezing my hand. "Your mom in the delivery room, my mom bringing the boys, and your grandmother. Everyone knows their roles." The plan was a delicate balance, crafted over months of discussions and negotiations. For both my previous deliveries, my mother had been my rock, guiding me through the storm of childbirth with a calmness that seemed almost supernatural. Especially after my last delivery, where complications had left me fighting for my life, her presence had been my anchor. I needed her there, again, for the birth of our daughter. Our daughter. The thought brought a smile to my face, mingling with the undercurrent of anxiety that had been my constant companion throughout this pregnancy. After 2 boys, the prospect of a girl had brought a new dimension to our family dynamic, one that filled me with both excitement and a hint of nervousness. "Everything will go as planned," Mark said, his voice laced with confidence I desperately wanted to mirror. "Your mom has been through this with you twice already. She wouldn't miss it for the world." I nodded, allowing his assurance to settle my frayed nerves. The plan was solid. Everyone was on board, and all we needed was for nature to take its course. But as the night grew deeper, and our house settled into a quiet that felt both comforting and eerie, I couldn't shake off a nagging sense of unease. Little did I know, that unease was a premonition of the turmoil that lay ahead. It was a crisp morning in early September, the kind that hinted at the impending shift from summer to autumn. The sky was a canvas of soft blues and grays as I awoke to a familiar pressure in my lower back, a dull, rhythmic pain that had become an old acquaintance over the past few months. But this morning it felt different. more insistent, as if nudging me towards a realization. It took me a moment, amidst the haze of sleep, to understand. The baby was coming. Mark was already up, a silhouette against the dim light of dawn, when I whispered, "It's time." The urgency of the moment swept us into a well-rehearsed routine. While I focused on my breathing, Mark called our mothers. "We're headed to the hospital. It's time," he said, his voice a blend of excitement and nervousness. To my mother-in-law he added, "Please pick up Mom, the kids, and Graham. Remember the plan." I clutched the phone, wanting to hear my mother's voice. "I'm on my way, sweetheart," she said, her voice calm and steady, a balm to my escalating anxiety. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Mark's steady hand on mine was the only anchor I had as waves of contractions began to wash over me. Each wave was a crescendo of pain and anticipation, a reminder of the life I was about to bring into the world. We arrived at the hospital as the sun peaked above the horizon, casting a golden glow that felt like a good omen. The nurses greeted us with practiced smiles, ushering us into a delivery room that felt both alien and strangely welcoming. "Your mom will be here soon," Mark reassured me as he helped me into the hospital gown. The sterile scent of the room mingled with my growing fear. I needed my mother there, her presence a vital piece of my mental armor against the pain and fear. Minutes turned into an hour, and still there was no sign of my mother. The contractions were intensifying, a relentless tide that left me breathless and scared. Mark tried to soothe me, but his words were a distant echo against the roaring in my ears. Finally the door opened, but it wasn't my mother who walked in. It was my mother-in-law, alone, her face a mixture of excitement and something I couldn't quite place. My heart sank. "Where's Mom?" I managed to ask, my voice strained. She's not coming. I thought it would be better to let everyone rest. It's still early," she said, settling into a chair as if this were just a minor change in plans. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She had unilaterally decided to alter the plan, to deny me the one person I needed most. Panic and anger surged through me, drowning out the pain of the contractions. "Mark, I need my mom. Please call her. She needs to be here," I said, my voice barely a whisper amid the chaos of emotions. As Mark stepped out to make the call, I was left with my mother-in-law, her presence a stark reminder of the support I had been denied. In that moment, the delivery room felt more like a prison, a place where my carefully laid plans and hopes were crumbling around me. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls inching nearer with every ticking second. My mother-in-law sat there, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. The pain of each contraction was now intertwined with a piercing sense of betrayal. She had disregarded our plan, our agreement, and I felt abandoned in my most vulnerable moment. "Why didn't you bring my mom?" I asked, my voice laced with pain and anger. "She was supposed to be here. I need her." My mother-in-law looked up, her expression one of surprise, as if the weight of my words was lost on her. "I thought it would be best to let everyone sleep. It's not a big deal, honey. I'm here for you," she said, her tone attempting comfort but only fueling my frustration. "Not a big deal?" I repeated, disbelief sharpening my words. "You changed everything. I don't need you here. I need my mom." The room was spinning, a carousel of pain and anger. I clutched the bedsheets, trying to anchor myself to something, anything. The contractions were coming faster now, a relentless tide that left no room for respite. My mother-in-law's face hardened. "Your mother had her chance with your other births. It's my turn now. I'm just trying to be fair." "Fair?" I gasped, the word a bitter laugh. "This isn't about fairness. This is about what I need. And I need my mom." Mark returned, his face etched with worry. "Your mom is on her way. She'll be here as soon as she can," he said, taking my hand. But the damage was done. The sanctity of this moment, the birth of our child, had been tainted by a selfish act that I couldn't forgive. "I want her out," I said, nodding towards my mother-in-law. "She has no place here." The confrontation escalated. My mother-in-law refused to leave, her justifications a cacophony in the chaos of my labor. It wasn't until a nurse, sensing the rising tension, intervened that she was finally escorted out. Alone with Mark, I tried to focus on the impending birth, but the seeds of resentment had been sown. Each passing minute was a reminder of the trust that had been broken, of the support that had been selfishly withheld. When my mother finally arrived, The relief I felt was tempered by a lingering bitterness. She swept into the room like a soothing breeze, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. But as she held my hand and whispered words of encouragement, I couldn't shake off the shadow that had been cast over this moment. The joy of welcoming a new life into the world was overshadowed by a sense of loss, not just for the plan that had fallen apart, but for the family harmony that had been shattered. As my daughter took her first breath, her cries a melody of new beginnings, I knew that the rift that had formed would not be easily mended. As the hours passed, the delivery room became my world, a microcosm of pain and perseverance. The absence of my mother during those initial hours had left a void, one that was only partially filled when she finally arrived. Her comforting touch and familiar voice were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the undercurrent of betrayal that flowed through me. My mother-in-law's decision to ignore our plan, to prioritize her desires over my needs, had sown seeds of resentment that took root deep within me. Even as my mother soothed me, her words of encouragement mingling with the clinical instructions of the nurses, my mind kept returning to that betrayal. I felt robbed of the peace and support I had so carefully orchestrated for this moment. Labor is a storm. It is raw and primal, a test of endurance and strength. But this time, it was also a battlefield of emotions. The physical pain of childbirth was amplified by the turmoil in my heart. Each contraction was a reminder of the support I had lost, the trust that had been broken. Mark was a constant presence, his hand a steady warmth in mine. But his attempts to comfort me seemed to falter in the face of my internal struggle. He was torn between his roles as a husband and a son, his own emotions a mix of concern, frustration, and helplessness. As I navigated the waves of labor, I found myself grappling with more than just the pain of childbirth. There was a sense of mourning for the experience I had envisioned, but lost. The joy of welcoming a new life was intertwined with grief for the harmony that had been shattered. In those long hours, my world reduced to the confines of that hospital room. The concept of time became elusive. Each minute stretched and contracted, marked only by the rhythm of my labor and the flood of emotions that accompanied it. When the moment of birth finally arrived, it was as if a storm had broken. The pain reached a crescendo, a tidal wave that threatened to overwhelm me. But through it all, there was a sense of determination, a resolve to bring my child into the world despite the chaos that surrounded her arrival. My daughter's first cry was a sound of pure, unadulterated life. It cut through the fog of pain and resentment, a clarion call that anchored me back to reality. As they placed her on my chest, her tiny body warm and quivering, I felt a surge of love that momentarily pushed aside the bitterness. But even as I held her, marveling at the miracle of her existence, the joy was tainted. The presence of my mother, comforting as it was, couldn't fully compensate for the absence of my other loved ones. The promise I had made to my sons, to have them there to meet their sister, was unfulfilled. And the gap that had formed between me and my mother-in-law seemed like a chasm too wide to bridge. In those first moments with my daughter, amidst the swirl of conflicting emotions, I knew that the journey ahead would be about more than just adjusting to life with a new baby. It would be a journey of healing, of navigating the complex terrain of family dynamics and personal hurt. The days following the birth of my daughter were a whirlwind of emotions. Joy, exhaustion, love, and an undercurrent of resentment all melded into one indescribable feeling. My daughter was perfect, a tiny bundle of life that brought a new sense of purpose and love. Yet the shadow of what transpired in the delivery room lingered, casting a pall over what should have been unadulterated happiness. As we settled back home, the reality of the situation began to fully sink in. My mother-in-law's actions had not only affected the birth of my daughter, but had also left a rift in our family. The resentment I felt towards her was a constant presence, an uninvited guest in every interaction. My husband, caught in the middle, struggled to navigate the tension. He tried to mediate, to bridge the gap that had formed between his mother and me. But the betrayal I felt was too deep, too raw to be easily soothed. His attempts, though well-intentioned, often felt like an added pressure to forgive and forget, to move on for the sake of family harmony. The reactions from the rest of the family varied, Some understood my anger, while others, like my mother-in-law, seemed baffled by the depth of my resentment. She didn't mean any harm, they would say, or she just wanted to be a part of the experience. But their words fell on deaf ears. The trust I had placed in her had been broken, and with it, the easy camaraderie we once shared. My mother, ever the peacemaker, encouraged me to talk it out with my mother-in-law. She's family, she reminded me. But the thought of facing her, of having to articulate the pain and betrayal I felt, seemed like an insurmountable task. The wound was still too fresh, the emotions too volatile. The most painful aspect of it all was the impact on my children. They had been excited to meet their sister at the hospital, a promise we had made but couldn't keep. Their disappointment was a reminder of the wider repercussions of my mother-in-law's actions. It was a lesson in the complexities of adult relationships that I wished they hadn't had to learn so soon. In those first weeks, as I navigated the challenges of caring for a newborn, the emotional turmoil added an unexpected layer of difficulty. The usual challenges of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes were compounded by a sense of loss, not just for the birth experience I had envisioned, but for the family unity that had been compromised. As time passed, the initial intensity of my anger began to fade, giving way to a lingering bitterness. The joy of my daughter's presence was a balm, but it couldn't entirely heal the rift that had formed. The relationship with my mother-in-law had been altered irrevocably, and I found myself grappling with the reality of what that meant for our family's future. In the weeks that followed, the rawness of my emotions began to dull, replaced by a persistent ache. The birth of my daughter, a time that should have been filled with pure joy, was overshadowed by a lingering sense of what had been lost. The relationship with my mother-in-law, once warm and cordial, had cooled into something distant and strained. Mark, ever the optimist, believed time would heal the rift. He encouraged conversations, family dinners, attempts to bridge the gap that had formed. But each interaction with my mother-in-law was a reminder of the trust that had been broken. Her presence, once comforting, now served as a trigger for the hurt and anger that bubbled beneath the surface. My mother, a constant source of support, urged me to find a way to forgive. "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," she would say, quoting a phrase she had always believed in. But the path to forgiveness seemed obscured, hidden beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. The dynamics within our extended family had shifted. Family gatherings, once a source of happiness and unity, now felt like navigating a minefield. Conversations were cautious, laughter forced, as if everyone was acutely aware of the undercurrents of tension. As for my children, they adapted to their new sister with the uncomplicated love that only children possess. They were blissfully unaware of the complexities of the adult relationships around them. Their innocence was a reminder of what was at stake, of the family harmony that needed to be restored, not just for my sake, but for theirs as well. In an attempt to find closure, I eventually agreed to a sit-down with my mother-in-law. It was a difficult conversation, filled with unspoken emotions and carefully chosen words. She expressed her perspective, her desire to be a part of the birth, and her belief that she had been making the best decision at the moment. I listened, the words washing over me, but found it hard to fully accept her explanations. The decision she made had been about her needs, not mine, and the repercussions were something I was still grappling with. The conversation ended with a tentative truce, an agreement to try and move forward for the sake of the family. But the ease of our previous relationship was gone, replaced by a cautious civility. In the months that followed, I focused on my family, on the joy that my daughter brought into our lives. Mark and I navigated the complexities of parenthood and our extended family dynamics, finding a new normal in the altered landscape of our relationships. The path to forgiveness and healing was not a straight one. It was filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, but with each passing day, the bitterness began to recede, giving way to a cautious hope for reconciliation. I realized that forgiveness was not a single act, but a process, a journey that required patience, understanding, and the willingness to see beyond the hurt. It was about finding peace, not just for myself, but for my family, a peace that was necessary for us to move forward, to rebuild the bonds that had been strained but not completely broken. Months turned into a year, And as the seasons changed, so did the dynamics within our family. The birth of my daughter, an event that had been marred by betrayal and conflict, slowly receded into the background, becoming a part of our family history, but not defining it. My relationship with my mother-in-law, once a source of warmth and support, had changed fundamentally. We had reached a point of civility, a mutual understanding that was more about coexistence than the closeness we once shared. I had learned to accept her presence in family gatherings, to engage in polite conversation, but the trust that had been broken was not easily rebuilt. The process of healing had been slow, a journey of introspection and understanding. I had grappled with my anger, the sense of betrayal, and the need to protect myself and my children from further hurt. But I had also come to recognize the value of family, of the intricate web of relationships that, despite their flaws, formed the tapestry of our lives. Mark had been my rock throughout this journey, a source of unwavering support and love. His ability to navigate the tension between his wife and mother, to provide comfort and understanding to both, had been nothing short of remarkable. Together, we had found a way to move forward, to focus on the joy and love that bound our family together. The lessons I had learned were not just about forgiveness, but about the complexities of human relationships. I had come to understand that people, even those closest to us, can make choices that hurt us deeply. But holding on to anger and resentment only served to prolong the pain. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about condoning the actions of others, but about freeing myself from the hold of negative emotions. It was a gift I gave myself, a way to find peace and move forward. As I watched my daughter grow, her milestones a series of joyful discoveries, I was reminded of the resilience of the human spirit. Her laughter, uninhibited and pure, was a balm to the lingering wounds of the past. Our family had changed, but it had also grown stronger in unexpected ways. We had learned to navigate our differences, to find a balance between the need for individual respect and the importance of family unity. As I reflect on the journey, on the pain and the healing, I am reminded of the unpredictability of life and the resilience it demands. The experience with my mother-in-law, though fraught with challenges, taught me invaluable lessons about empathy, boundaries, and the complex nature of love and forgiveness. Looking back, I see not just a story of conflict, but one of growth and understanding. It's a narrative that underscores the fact that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can choose how we respond to them. My response, ultimately, was to embrace forgiveness, not for the sake of my mother-in-law, but for my own peace of mind and for the well-being of my family. As I watch my children play, their laughter echoing in our home, I'm reminded of the importance of moving beyond past hurts. In their innocence and joy, they embody the spirit of forgiveness and the endless capacity for love. They are a constant reminder that despite life's trials, our capacity to love and to heal is boundless. This journey has also reinforced the importance of clear communication and setting boundaries. My experience has taught me to be more vocal about my needs and expectations in relationships, ensuring that my voice is heard and respected. In the end, the story of my daughter's birth is not just about a moment of betrayal. It's a testament to the power of healing and the strength of the human heart. It's about finding a way to coexist and maintain family ties, even when they are tested by conflict and misunderstanding. As I close this chapter of my life, I look forward with hope and a deeper understanding of myself and the people around me. The scars remain, but they are a part of who I am, a reminder of the journey I've been through and the lessons I've learned. They speak of my strength, my capacity to forgive, and my unwavering commitment to my family.